20 years driving a Mercedes that cost more than I would earn in 3 whole lifetimes. 20 years sitting in the front seat, separated by half a meter of Italian leather and a social chasm that no conversation would ever cross. 20 years of being invisible. My name is Marcos Henrique da Silva. I'm 47 years old, with gray hair that started showing up too early, and calloused hands that still tremble when I grip the steering wheel on cold days. I was born in the outskirts of São Paulo, grew up watching my mother clean other people's houses, and learned early on that people like us don't have a voice. We have a function. For 2 decades, my function was simple: drive Dr. Eduardo Carvalho Neto wherever he needed to go, and disappear when I was no longer needed. People look at a private driver and see a uniform. They don't see the man inside it. I got used to that. In fact, that's exactly why I was hired. I remember the day of the interview like it was yesterday. It was 2005. I was 27 years old and desperately needed a stable job. My son had just been born. My wife was at home with postpartum fever, and the bills were piling up like cruel reminders that I wasn't man enough to support my family. When I saw the ad asking for a private driver for an industrial businessman, I thought it was a joke. People like me don't work for people like them. But I went. I arrived at the mansion in the upscale neighborhood at 6 in the morning, wearing the only suit I owned, bought used at a second-hand market. The gate was so high I had to tilt my head back to see the top. The house looked like a bank, all glass and steel, shining under the morning sun as if it were made of liquid money. Dr. Eduardo received me in his office, a room bigger than my entire house, with shelves full of books I knew he'd never read. He was tall, thin even back then, with gray eyes that seemed to pierce through your skin and read your most secret thoughts. He wore a dark suit, a gold wedding ring on his left hand, and spoke with the economy of words of someone used to being obeyed without having to shout. "I need someone invisible," he said bluntly. "No handshake, no pleasantries." My last driver thought knowing my schedule gave him the right to have an opinion on my life. He also thought he could siphon money from the vehicle maintenance. "You look like a man who knows how to keep quiet, do you?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "You will take me wherever I order. You will wait as long as necessary. You will hear conversations that aren't yours and forget them immediately. You will witness meetings, phone calls, encounters, and you will pretend you witnessed nothing. Can you do that?" "I can, sir." He studied me for a long minute, those gray eyes weighing my soul like someone evaluating merchandise. Then he nodded. "Start Monday, 6 in the morning, never be late." And so began the strangest 20 years of my life. At first, I really was invisible. Dr. Eduardo would get in the car, state the address, and that was it. Silence. He worked on his tablet, took calls in English that I didn't understand, wrote furious emails that I saw reflected in the rearview mirror. I drove. That was our tacit agreement. He existed in the back seat, I existed in the front seat, and never the two met. For the first 5 years, he didn't know my full name. He called me Driver when he needed something. "Driver, stop here. Driver, pick me up at 8. Driver, today we're going to the office." I would answer, "Yes, sir," and obey, simple as that. But the black Mercedes S-Class became a sort of confessional without a priest. Because Dr. Eduardo talked. Not to me, of course. To me, he never spoke. Not really. But he talked on the phone. He talked to himself. He talked thinking I was part of the dashboard, an accessory that came along with the V8 engine and the leather seats. I heard when he cried for the first time, a stifled sound of someone who learned that tears are weakness. I was there when his children called asking for money and hung up without saying, "I love you." I was there when partners plotted scams and when holidays passed unnoticed. The black Mercedes S-Class became a sort of confessional without a priest. Dr. Eduardo won every legal battle, but lost any faith he still had in trusting anyone. And through all of this, I drove. Kept my mouth shut, eyes on the road, and my heart heavier and heavier with the weight of the secrets I carried. Because I saw what no one else saw. A man immensely rich and deeply alone. It was in the 15th year that something changed. We were stuck in traffic on a major avenue late at night, after a meeting that had dragged on until 10. Dr. Eduardo was in the back seat, looking out the window at the people on the sidewalks, when suddenly he asked, "Do you have children, driver?" I almost crashed the car in surprise. In 15 years, that was the first personal question he had asked me. "I do, sir. A son, 14 years old." "Does he study?" "Yes, sir. On a scholarship at a technical school. He wants to be an engineer." Silence. Then, so quiet I almost didn't hear. "Lucky you." I thought that would be it, but it wasn't. After that day, he started asking me small things. How the traffic was. If I thought it was going to rain. Nothing deep, nothing that would break the social barrier between us. But they were words, acknowledgement that I existed. In the 18th year, after a particularly difficult day where Gustavo showed up drunk at the office demanding money, Dr. Eduardo got into the car and said, "You've never asked me for anything. Why?" The question caught me off guard. I thought carefully before answering. "It's not my place, sir. But you hear everything. You know how much money I have. You know about my problems. You could have blackmailed me 1,000 times." "I could have," I admitted. "But you pay me a fair wage. You treat me with respect, in your own way. I don't need more than that." He remained silent for so long I thought I had said something wrong. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw he was watching me with an expression I had never seen before. It almost looked like curiosity, maybe even respect. "You are a good man, driver." A pause. A good driver, I mean. But we both knew what he had said first. And then came yesterday, March 3rd, 2025. The day everything changed. It was 11 at night when my cell phone rang. Dr. Eduardo's number. Strange, because he never called after hours. He always sent a WhatsApp message advising of the next day's appointments. "Driver." His voice was different, weak, breathless. "Need hospital. Now." "I'm on my way, sir." I left the house in 15 minutes, drove the 45 minutes across the city with my heart hammering in my chest. When I arrived at the mansion, the gate was open. He never left the gate open. I found Dr. Eduardo sitting in the living room, hunched over, one hand pressing his chest. He had lost even more weight in recent months, his suit hanging loose on his bony shoulders. The gray eyes that had always been so piercing now looked like frosted glass. The gold wedding band still shone on his finger, faithful to the dead even when the living had abandoned him. "The hospital," he whispered as I helped him into the car. I drove faster than I should have, but carefully enough not to jostle him. He was lying in the back seat, breathing with difficulty. Through the rearview mirror, I saw his chest rising and falling irregularly. "Sir?" I said, breaking 20 years of obedient silence. "Hang in there. We're almost there." To my surprise, he laughed. It was a weak, painful laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. 20 years, driver. For 20 years you took me everywhere. Meetings, the airport, the hospital when Helena. When she... His voice failed. "Don't speak, sir. Save your strength." "No." The word came out firm, with a flash of his old authority. "I need to speak, while I still can." We were 3 blocks from the hospital when I heard him move. I looked in the mirror and saw he had partially raised himself, leaning on his elbow, those gray eyes fixed on me for the first time in 20 years, really fixed on me, without pretense, without social layers between us. "Marcos." "My name." He said my name. "Marcos Henrique da Silva," he continued, every word an effort. "You need to. When they ask, tell them." "Tell them what, sir?" "We're arriving. Just hold on a little longer." I stopped the car in front of the emergency room. Doctors and nurses were already coming with a gurney. Someone must have called ahead. But before I could open the door, I felt his hand squeezing my shoulder. A weak, trembling hand, but insistent. I turned back. Our eyes met. "Tell them you were more than a driver." Then his hand fell. His eyes closed. And Dr. Eduardo Carvalho Neto, 72 years old, owner of a steel empire worth over 800 million reais, collapsed unconscious on the Italian leather seat, while the medical team invaded the car, pushing me aside shouting technical terms I didn't understand. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching them take him on a stretcher, connecting machines, running into the hospital as if they were racing against time itself. And all I could think about were those last words. More than a driver. What the hell did that mean? For 20 years I was exactly a driver. Nothing more. That was the rule. His rule. The rule I accepted in that immense office when I was 27 and too desperate to question anything. But now, standing there in the middle of the night, watching the automatic hospital doors close between me and the man I had served for 2 decades, I felt something strange growing in my chest. Fear. Not of losing him, though that prospect hurt more than I wanted to admit, but fear of what would come next. Fear of the meaning behind those words. Fear that, for the first time in 20 years, I might be about to become visible. And visibility, I had learned long ago, was dangerous for people like me. I took off my chauffeur's cap, ran my hand through my graying hair, and started walking toward the hospital entrance. I didn't know if they would let me in. I didn't know if I had the right to be there. I didn't know anything, but his last words echoed in my mind like a riddle I needed to solve. Tell them you were more than a driver. For 20 years, I was invisible. A ghost in a worn suit sitting in the front seat. A silent witness to a life that was never mine. Now, walking toward those glass doors, I wondered if Dr. Eduardo had seen something in me that I myself could never see, or if those were just the confused words of a dying man, with no meaning beyond the delirium of pain. I knew only one thing for sure. My life of being invisible was over, and I wasn't prepared for what came next. The glass doors of Saint Louis Hospital slid open with a mechanical whisper, and the air conditioning wrapped around me like a cold curtain. I hesitated at the entrance, not because I didn't know the way. I knew every corridor of that hospital by heart. I had waited here during Dr. Eduardo's wife's surgery, over 10 years ago. I had sat in those same faux leather chairs when he went through his last battery of tests 6 months ago. But now, without Dr. Eduardo by my side to give instructions, without a clear task, I didn't know my place. It was strange. 20 years driving, 20 years following orders. And now, for the first time, I was alone in that world of polished marble and well-dressed people, with no one to tell me where I was supposed to be. I walked toward the reception desk, the steps of my worn shoes echoing against the gleaming floor. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect red lipstick, looked up for a second before returning to her computer screen. "Can I help you?" She didn't look at me as she asked. I'm looking for information on Dr. Eduardo Carvalho Neto. He was admitted a few hours ago." Relationship? The word caught me off guard. Relationship. 20 years, and I had never stopped to think about how to describe what I was to him. "I'm his driver." She finally looked at me, her eyes doing that quick scan I knew so well. Worn uniform, calloused hands, the posture of someone used to waiting on their feet. "Family members are in the ICU waiting room, 3rd floor." She was already turning back to her screen before finishing the sentence. I took the elevator, squeezed between a doctor in a white coat and a woman with a bouquet of expensive flowers. No one looked at me. I was part of the decor. Invisible. 3rd floor. The doors opened to a silent corridor, with that soft lighting hospitals use to pretend death isn't always lurking in the corners. At the end, a sign read, ICU, waiting room. I saw her before she saw me. Beatriz Carvalho was sitting in a gray armchair, legs crossed with that studied elegance only old money can buy. She wore a black Chanel dress, the kind of outfit that costs more than I made in 3 months. Her hair was pulled back in a flawless bun, and her fingers, covered in diamond rings, held a latest generation phone. Beside her, Gustavo Carvalho leaned against the wall, his Armani suit creased with military precision. He fiddled with the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, that nervous tick I'd seen dozens of times in the rearview mirror when he was borrowing money from his father. Neither of them was crying. I took a deep breath and approached, my driver's cap still in my hands. I didn't know what to say. My condolences? Ask about Dr. Eduardo's condition? Offer help? Beatrice looked up first, and in that look, I saw everything I needed to know about my place there. "What are you doing here?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I brought Dr. Eduardo. I wanted to know how he is. Gustavo laughed. It was a short, humorless sound. He's dying, Marcos. That's how he is. He spat my name out like it was something dirty. And you don't need to hang around pretending you care. Your job is done. You can go home. I squeezed the cap between my fingers. Dr. Eduardo's words still echoed in my mind. More than a driver. But looking at his children, I felt exactly like what I had always been. Less. Invisible. Disposable. I just wanted... You can wait in the parking garage where you belong. Beatrice's voice was sharp as glass. If we need you to carry something, we'll call you. A nurse passing down the hall looked at us, eyes full of that silent pity people feel when witnessing someone else's humiliation. But she said nothing. She just kept walking. I should have left. I should have turned around, gone down the elevator, gone back to my apartment in Capon Redondo, and waited for someone to call and tell me if Dr. Eduardo had survived or not. But his words wouldn't leave me. Tell them you were more than a driver. Before I could answer, the elevator opened again, and a man in a charcoal gray suit stepped out, a black leather briefcase under his arm. He must have been about 60, gray hair slicked back, thin-rimmed glasses reflecting the fluorescent light. The man in the charcoal suit. Dr. Eduardo's lawyer. I had driven him dozens of times to business meetings, lunches, contract signings. He always sat in the back seat and worked in silence, offering just a polite, "Thank you, Marcos," when getting out of the car. Beatrice stood up immediately, the phone disappearing into her Louis Vuitton bag. "Dr. Henrique, I'm so glad you came. We need to discuss the next steps in case..." She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. "In case my father dies." The lawyer nodded, but his eyes moved down the hallway and landed on me. There was something in his gaze. Recognition. And more than that, interest. "Marcos." He said my name with a weight that made me swallow hard. "How long have you been working for Dr. Eduardo?" The question caught me off guard. Gustavo and Beatrice looked confused too. 20 years, sir." Dr. Henrique nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. 20 years, he repeated almost to himself. It's a long time to be by someone's side. To see who they really are. Gustavo stepped forward, his voice tense. "Dr. Henrique, with all due respect, we don't need to discuss family matters in front of the driver." He was just leaving. But the lawyer didn't take his eyes off me. "Were you with him today, when he was admitted?" "Yes, sir. I brought him in." "And did he say anything? In those final moments before losing consciousness?" My heart raced. Dr. Eduardo's words burned in my memory. But something about the way Beatrice and Gustavo were looking at me, with that mix of disdain and suspicion, made me hesitate. "He was confused, sir. In pain." Dr. Henrique gripped his briefcase tighter, his eyes still fixed on me. There was something there. An intensity that didn't match the casual conversation. "Confused," he repeated. "Interesting, because in the last few weeks, Dr. Eduardo was more lucid than ever, especially when he updated his will." The silence that descended upon the hallway was heavy as lead. Beatrice was the first to react. "Updated? When? Why weren't we informed?" The lawyer finally shifted his gaze from me to her, and his expression returned to that impenetrable professional mask. "Dr. Eduardo has the right to make changes to his will without consulting anyone, Beatrice. You know that. But can you at least tell us what it's about?" Gustavo had that urgent tone of someone trying to disguise panic. "I cannot. Not until the appropriate time." Dr. Henrique adjusted his glasses. "But I can tell you that the provisions are unconventional." Unconventional. The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw the way Beatrice and Gustavo looked at each other. I saw the tension in his shoulders, her clenched jaw. Whatever Dr. Eduardo had done, they weren't expecting it. And somehow, from the way the lawyer had looked at me, from the weight he had put on the question about how long I had worked for Dr. Eduardo, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Was I in that will? The idea was ridiculous, absurd. I was a driver, an employee. 20 years of service might result in a decent severance package, maybe a farewell bonus, but nothing that justified the look Dr. Henrique had given me. Nothing that justified Dr. Eduardo's words in the car. More than a driver. A nurse came out of the ICU double doors, her expression grave. Everyone turned around. Carvalho family? Beatriz and Gustavo stepped forward immediately. The nurse looked at me too, uncertain. "I'm the driver," I explained, taking a step back. "He is stable at the moment," the nurse said, addressing Beatriz and Gustavo. "But his condition is delicate. Only immediate family members can go in, one at a time, for a maximum of 10 minutes. Beatriz was already moving toward the doors. "I'll go first." Gustavo didn't protest. He leaned back against the wall, pulling his phone from his pocket, fingers flying across the screen, probably already calling lawyers, accountants, preparing for what would come next. Dr. Henrique approached me, his voice low. "Marcos, you should stick around. For now." But they said that... I know what they said. There was something gentle in his tone, but also firm. "But trust me. Dr. Eduardo left. Instructions. And you are part of them." Instructions. My heart beat faster. What does that mean? Dr. Henrique snapped his briefcase shut, the sound echoing through the hallway like a gavel striking. "It means your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine." And with that, he turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving me there, alone in the hallway, with Gustavo typing furiously on his phone a few meters away. I sat down in one of the waiting room chairs, my cap still in my hands. 2 nurses passed by, talking in low voices. "Family only shows up when he's dying," one of them murmured. 20 years building this empire, and the kids only care about the inheritance. The other sighed. "It's always like that. Money makes people forget what matters." They disappeared through a side door, but the words remained. 20 years. I had spent 20 years by Dr. Eduardo's side. I had seen him cry in the back seat when his wife died. I had heard him scream on the phone when he found out Gustavo had embezzled money from the company. I had been there in silence when Beatriz canceled his birthday lunch for the 3rd time in a row because she had a fashion show in Milan. And in all that time, he had never asked for anything other than my silence and my presence. Until today. Tell them you were more than a driver. The will has been updated. Unconventional provisions. You are part of the instructions. I didn't understand. I couldn't put the pieces together. But something had changed. Something Dr. Eduardo had done in the last days of his life. Something not even his children knew about. And somehow, impossibly and terrifyingly, that thing had to do with me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, the smell of disinfectant filling my lungs. Outside, through the waiting room windows, the city shone in the night. The lights of the upscale buildings twinkled like fallen stars, each illuminated window hiding lives I would never know, worlds I would never belong to. I was Marcos Henrique da Silva, 47 years old, driver, invisible. But Dr. Eduardo had seen something in me, something his own children didn't have. And whatever it was written in a will that no one but the lawyer had seen. I opened my eyes and looked at the empty hallway, at the ICU doors where Dr. Eduardo was fighting between life and death. And for the first time in 20 years, I asked myself, what if he had really seen me? What if, somehow, in those long years of silence, he had seen something I didn't even know existed? The ICU door opened. Beatriz walked out, eyes dry, her face a mask of perfect control. She passed by me without looking, grabbed her purse, and walked straight to the elevator. Gustavo went in next, and I sat there, alone in the waiting room, cap in hand and a knot in my stomach, waiting, as I always did. But this time, I didn't know for what. The hours dragged on. The clock on the wall seemed to mock my weight. I didn't know why I was still there. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was fear of leaving and discovering that without him, I would cease to exist. I was the silent listener to the life of a man who couldn't trust anyone else. And maybe Maybe I was the only person who really saw him too. Not as a billionaire, not as Dr. Eduardo Carvalho Neto, the steel tycoon, but as a man, alone, tired, human. The ICU door opened suddenly, pulling me from my thoughts. A nurse rushed out, then another, and then I heard Beatrice's voice, loud, furious. "You can't be serious! He's delirious!" The doctor answered something I couldn't hear, and then Dr. Eduardo's voice, weak but firm. "Marcos, I want to speak to Marcos." I stood up from the chair. My whole body was tense. Beatrice appeared in the doorway, her face red with rage. "You are not going in. You are not." But the doctor interrupted her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the patient was very clear. He wants to speak only with Mr. Marcos." Gustavo approached, trying to block me. He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. But the doctor shook his head. He is lucid, and it is his right to choose who he wants by his side. Beatrice looked at me with a hatred I had never seen before. "If you go into that room, you'll regret it." I looked at her, at Gustavo, at the two children of a dying man who preferred fighting over being by his side. And then I looked at the doctor. Is he calling for me? He is. I took a deep breath, and I went in. Because after 20 years, for the first time, Dr. Eduardo wasn't asking me to drive. He was asking me to stay, and I was going to stay. Until the end. The ICU door opened with a whisper of pressurized air, and I stepped into another world. A world of machines breathing for people who could no longer breathe on their own. A world of cold lights and constant beeps marking every heartbeat. A world where death waited patiently around every corner. Dr. Eduardo was at the center of that universe of tubes and monitors. So small, so fragile, so different from the man I knew. 20 years. For 20 years I had seen him only through the rearview mirror, always imposing in the back seat of the Mercedes, always upright, always in control. Now, he was sunken into a hospital bed, connected to machines that kept his body running while his strength abandoned him. The oxygen mask covered half his face. His hair, always perfectly combed, was messy. His hands, those hands that signed million-dollar contracts, that built an empire, trembled slightly on the white sheet. But it was his eyes that held me. Those piercing gray eyes that always seemed to see right through people's social masks. Now they were cloudy, struggling to focus, struggling to find me. And when they found me, something changed in them. "Sir," I said softly, approaching the bed. "I'm here." His fingers moved. A nurse adjusted something on the IV. The heart monitor sped up slightly. "Leave us, Doctor." Eduardo's voice came out muffled by the mask, but charged with an authority that not even death could erase. "Leave us alone." From the hallway, I heard Gustavo's immediate protest. "Dad, you need to rest. This man shouldn't." "Alone!" The word came with such force that the monitor spiked. The nurse looked worried. "Please," Dr. Eduardo said more softly, looking at the medical team. "A few minutes. Just a few minutes." They left. All of them. Beatrice passed me with a look of pure poison. Gustavo muttered something about suing if anything happens. The lawyer hesitated at the door, his eyes going from Eduardo to me, as if witnessing something important. And then we were alone. Me and the man who had defined the last 20 years of my life. The silence was different from the silence in the car. In the Mercedes, it was a silence of distance, of hierarchy, of well-defined roles. Here, it was a silence of urgency, of unspoken things that needed to be said before it was too late. "Marcos," he said my name for the second time in 20 years. The first had been at the interview. "Sit down." I pulled up the chair, that plastic hospital chair that had seen so many vigils, so many farewells. My hands were trembling. I didn't know what to do with them. "Give me your hand." I froze. In 20 years, Dr. Eduardo had never touched me. Not a handshake, not a pat on the back, nothing. I was the driver. I was invisible. Invisibles don't get touched. But there, in that hospital room filled with machines fighting death, his hand reached out. trembling, thin, with translucent skin showing the blue veins beneath. And on his ring finger, that gold band he hadn't taken off since his wife died 10 years ago. Loyalty to the dead over the living. I always knew that. I reached out my hand. It was thick, calloused from the steering wheel, from so many years of work. When our fingers touched, I felt an electric shock run through my whole body. He squeezed, weakly but firmly, as if holding on to me to keep from falling into an abyss. "Thank you," he whispered, "for staying." "Sir, 20 years," he interrupted me. His eyes were fixed on mine now with a piercing intensity. 20 years you drove my car. 20 years you heard everything. My calls, my meetings, my screams, my tears. He paused, gasping for air. You saw my wife die. You saw my son steal from me. You saw my daughter forget me. The monitor sped up again. Every word cost him. Every sentence was a struggle against a failing body. "Sir, please don't strain yourself." "No." He squeezed my hand tighter. "I don't have much time left, and I need you to know." His eyes shone, moist. "You think you were invisible all these years?" I said nothing. Because yes, I did. I knew it. You weren't invisible to me, Marcos. A tear slid from the corner of his eye, losing itself in the oxygen mask. You were the only person who saw me, really saw me. Not my money, not my company, not what I could give, just me. My throat tightened. 20 years of unspoken words were rising, wanting out. My children, he continued, and there was deep pain in those words. My children loved my money. Every visit was a negotiation. Every phone call was a request. Every hug had a price. He closed his eyes briefly. But you, 20 years, Marcos. 20 years and you never asked for anything. Not a raise, not a favor, not recognition. Sir, I was just doing my job. No! The word came out explosive, desperate. The monitor alarms blared. It wasn't just work. You stayed when my wife died, remember? After the funeral, everyone left. Everyone. Beatrice had a fashion show in Milan. Gustavo had an important meeting. But you... His voice broke. You stayed in the cemetery parking lot. 4 hours. Just waiting. In case I needed you. I remembered. Of course I remembered. It had been a cold day in July. I'd sat in the car, watching the rain fall, knowing Dr. Eduardo was inside alone with his grief. I hadn't thought of leaving. Not until I knew he was okay. You never saw me as a wallet, he said, and now the tears fell freely. You saw me as a man. Something broke inside me. 20 years of silence. 20 years of being invisible. 20 years of believing my worth was just in driving well, being on time, asking no questions. Sir, my voice came out hoarse, trembling. You gave me more than a salary. You gave me purpose. I swallowed hard. When I started working for you, I was nothing. Just another driver, disposable, invisible. But you... I had to stop. The words were hard to find. You gave me dignity. You may not have said it. You may not have shown it. But I knew. I knew my work mattered. That my loyalty mattered. That I mattered. Tears blurred my vision. I was never invisible to God, sir. And now I know. I was never invisible to you either. Eduardo squeezed my hand with a strength that didn't seem possible for someone so frail. His eyes were fixed on mine, shining with something that looked like relief, as if he had waited 20 years to hear that. That's why, he said, every word heavy with meaning. That's why I needed you to know. My children will find out soon. The will. They'll be furious. They'll hate you. But I need you to understand why. My heart raced. The will? Me? Sir, I don't need... You never needed it, he interrupted me, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. You never wanted it, and that is exactly why. He paused, gasping for air. The monitor began to emit a different sound, more urgent. That's why I... His body tensed. The hand holding mine suddenly clamped down like a vice. Sir? Panic rose in my throat. Sir! It's why... that I... His eyes were wide now, struggling to finish, needing to finish. That's why I gave you... The monitor triggered a continuous alarm, a flatline, a sound that pierced the eardrums. No! I stood up, gripping his hand with both of mine. Sir, please. What? What did you give me? Sir. But those gray eyes that had always seen me, that had always seen through everything, were still now, fixed, empty. The door burst open. Nurses, doctors, machines, shouts of crash cart, and adrenaline and CPR. Hands pulled me back, hands tore me away from him, but I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go of that hand that had squeezed mine for the first and last time. Sir, please, I begged, even knowing it was useless. Finish it. Finish it. That's why I... What? What had he given me? What was he trying to say? Someone pushed me out of the room. The hallway spun. Beatrice was screaming. Gustavo was demanding answers. The lawyer was saying something about last wishes and valid will. But I could only hear those incomplete words echoing in my head. That's why I gave you. A doctor came out of the room 20 minutes later. His face said it all. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. Beatrice collapsed into a chair, sobbing. But they were tears of shock, not sorrow. Gustavo punched the wall, furious. Furious at what? At death? At his father? At me? This is your fault! Gustavo suddenly turned on me, his eyes bloodshot. You wore him out. You killed him. Gustavo, please, the lawyer tried to intervene. No, this driver goes in there and suddenly my father dies? What a convenient coincidence. He lunged at me. What did you say to him? What did you do? I didn't do anything. My voice came out weak, in shock. He wanted to speak to me. Speak about what? Beatrice was standing now, tears smudging her expensive makeup. About the will? Did you convince him to change something? I didn't even know there was a will until today. Liar! Gustavo spat the word out. You spent 20 years playing the nice guy, waiting for this moment. The lawyer stepped between us. That is enough. Everyone is grieving. This is no time for accusations. When, then? Beatrice wiped her face with the back of her hand. When are we going to find out what this employee was planning? Your father, the lawyer said with a firm voice, left very clear instructions. The reading of the will takes place in 3 days. All interested parties must be present. His eyes lingered on me for a second longer. Everyone. 3 days. 3 days to figure out what Dr. Eduardo had tried to tell me. 3 days to understand why he had squeezed my hand. 3 days to learn what "that's why I gave you" meant. I left the hospital alone that night. The Mercedes was in the parking lot, gleaming under the artificial lights. But I didn't have the keys anymore. They had stayed with the lawyer. After all, the car wasn't mine. It never was. I took the bus back to Capão Redondo. The same crowded bus I used to take before working for Dr. Eduardo. The same tired people heading home after exhausting days. The same smell of sweat and fatigue. As if 20 years hadn't passed. As if I hadn't just held a billionaire's hand while he died. As if incomplete words weren't tearing me apart inside. That's why I gave you. Gave what? I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the dirty bus window. Outside, São Paulo passed by as it always did. Indifferent, immense, unequal. Jardins with its luxury buildings gradually giving way to simple houses, to potholed streets, to the reality most people knew. My reality. And in the middle of it all, a question that wouldn't leave me in peace. What had a dying billionaire tried to tell me? And why, for the first time in 20 years, had he held my hand? 3 days. 72 hours since his hand had held mine for the first time in 20 years. 72 hours since he had tried to tell me something and death had interrupted him mid-sentence. That's why I... What was he going to say? That's why I what? Those unfinished words tormented me every minute of those 3 days, while I tried to sleep in my apartment in Capão Redondo, while I stared at the driver's uniform hanging in the closet, wondering if I'd ever wear it again, while I received calls from the law firm requesting my presence at the reading of the will. "Your presence is mandatory, Mr. Da Silva," the secretary had said. "Dr. Almeida insists. Mandatory. As if I were someone important. As if my presence mattered." And now, here I was standing in front of this mirrored building on Rua Estados Unidos, in the heart of Jardins. The same neighborhood where Dr. Eduardo had lived. Where I had spent 20 years driving, waiting, being invisible. But today, I wasn't driving anyone. Today, I was wearing the same worn-out uniform, because it was the only presentable outfit I had. The same black trousers with the crease already faded. The same white shirt I had washed and ironed so many times the fabric was almost transparent at the elbows. The same black shoes I polished every week to shine just as bright as the shoes of the millionaires I chauffeured. The difference is that today, for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't entering through the service entrance. I pushed open the heavy glass door. The air conditioning hit me like a cold wave. The marble floor reflected the lights of the crystal chandelier above. Everything in that place screamed money, power, a world I had never belonged to. "Mr. Da Silva?" A receptionist looked at me over her designer glasses. Her expression was polite, but I recognized that look. The same look I had received for 20 years. The look that said, "You don't belong here." "Dr. Almeida is expecting you, 12th floor, room 1200. I stepped into the mirrored elevator. I saw my reflection multiplied infinitely. Marcos Henrique da Silva, 47 years old, ex-driver, unemployed. What was I doing here? The doors opened directly into a reception area, done entirely in shades of gray and black. Dark wood. Abstract paintings that probably cost more than I made in a year. And there they were. Beatriz Carvalho was sitting on a designer leather sofa, legs crossed with calculated elegance, an expensive suit, designer shoes, hair impeccably pulled back in a bun. She was looking at her phone with that expression of cold indifference I knew so well. Gustavo Carvalho paced back and forth, his expensive watch knocking against the cuff of his designer shirt with every nervous step. He had always been anxious, impatient, used to having everything immediately. When they saw me, the world froze for a second. Beatriz looked up from her phone. Her expression shifted from boredom to something between disgust and confusion. "You?" She said the word as if spitting out something sour. "What are you doing here?" "I was summoned," I replied, clutching my chauffeur's cap in my hands. Damn habit. 20 years holding this cap like a shield. "Summoned." Gustavo let out a humorless laugh. "Dad must have left you a tip. 1,000 reais. 5,000? To ease his guilty conscience." Beatriz went back to her phone, dismissing me from the conversation as she always did. Like I was furniture, like I didn't exist. I sat on the farthest sofa. They continued talking amongst themselves, speaking openly as they always did when I was around. Because drivers don't count. Drivers don't listen. Drivers don't exist. Everything goes to us. "Obviously," Beatrice was saying. 50% each. That's what's in the original will. "But he updated it," Gustavo reminded her, anxiety clear in his voice. 2 weeks ago, the lawyer said he updated it. Probably just some legal formality. Dad was always meticulous about those details. Or maybe he changed the distribution. Maybe he favored me because you never... I never what, Gustavo? Never squandered his money? Never borrowed money I never paid back? At least I showed up. You barely visited, always busy with your work, your trips abroad. Showing up to ask for money doesn't count as... The Carvalho family. The voice interrupted the argument. A man in his 60s, perfectly groomed gray hair, tailored navy suit, leather briefcase in hand. I knew him from countless rides. I had driven Mr. Eduardo to meetings with him dozens of times. He looked at Beatrice and Gustavo, then at me, and smiled. It wasn't the polite smile lawyers give rich clients. It was something different. Something I couldn't decipher. "Please follow me," We entered a conference room with a mahogany table that looked like it had been carved from a single ancient tree. Glass windows offered a panoramic view of São Paulo. I could even see the Edificio Italia from there. Beatrice and Gustavo sat on one side of the table, naturally taking the main chairs. I stood there, hesitant. "Mr. Da Silva, please." Dr. Almeida pointed to a chair on the other side of the table. "Sit down." I sat. The chair was more comfortable than anything I had ever sat on in my life. Dr. Almeida opened his briefcase and took out a sealed envelope. Thick, yellowed. The kind of expensive paper rich people use for important things. "We are gathered here for the reading of the last will and testament of Eduardo Carvalho Neto, deceased on March 15, 2025. His voice had that formality of someone who had done this hundreds of times. This will was updated and notarized on March 1st, 14 days before his passing in full mental capacity, as attested by 3 independent physicians. Gustavo leaned forward. Beatrice crossed her arms. I held my cap in my lap, trying to breathe. Before proceeding, I must inform you that Mr. Eduardo also recorded a video statement, certified by a notary, explaining his testamentary decisions. This video is available should there be any question regarding his lucidity or intentions." "Question?" Beatrice frowned. "Why would there be a question? We are the only heirs." Dr. Almeida didn't answer. He just opened the envelope with a silver letter opener. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the room like a gunshot. He unfolded the document. 4 pages. Typed. The law firm's gold stamp. I, Eduardo Carvalho Neto, Brazilian, widower, businessman, residing and domiciled in the city of São Paulo, state of São Paulo, in full possession of my mental faculties, declare by this private instrument my last will and testament. My heart was beating so loud I could barely hear. After deep reflection on my life, my legacy, and the true meaning of family and loyalty, I decide the following. Gustavo drummed his fingers on the table. Beatrice checked her nails. I leave the entirety of my assets, without exception, including but not limited to 870 million reais in liquid assets, the mansion located at Rua Augusta, 1500 in Jardins, valued at 45 million reais, the controlling shares of Carvalho Steel Industries, with an estimated value of 1,200 million reais, in addition to all real estate properties, vehicles, works of art, and any other assets in my name. Dr. Almeida's voice droned on, but I could no longer process the numbers. They were too big, too abstract. Beatrice had stopped looking at her nails. Gustavo had stopped drumming his fingers. To Marcos Henrique da Silva. Silence. Complete. Absolute. As if the world had stopped spinning. "Excuse me?" Beatrice's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Did you say?" To Marcos Henrique da Silva. Tax ID number 345.678.921-37, residing at Rua das Palmeiras, 123, apartment 45, Capão Redondo, São Paulo. My address, my ID, my name. My private driver for the last 20 years, who proved to possess the rarest form of wealth I have ever encountered. Loyalty without agenda. Integrity without expectation. Kindness without an audience. That's impossible. Gustavo stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. This can't be real. He manipulated my father. A 47-year-old man manipulating a dying man. I started, but my voice came out too weak. "Parasite!" Beatrice screamed, standing up as well. 20 years planning this, 20 years infiltrating, pretending to be humble, waiting for the right moment. He wasn't in his right mind. Gustavo slammed his hand on the table. "We're going to contest this. We'll prove he was senile, medicated, that this thief took advantage of a sick man." Dr. Almeida remained impassive. As I mentioned, there is a video statement recorded 3 weeks ago, when Dr. Eduardo was in full health, before the final decline. 3 independent doctors attested to his mental capacity. 2 psychiatrists confirmed the absence of any undue influence. He was lucid, determined, and absolutely certain of his decision. "We're going to sue!" Beatrice turned to me, her eyes filled with poison. "You're going to give back every cent, you leech!" I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. 870 million. The mansion, the companies, everything, to me. "There is more," Dr. Almeida continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. Dr. Eduardo wrote a personal letter to be read at this moment. "With everyone's permission, I will proceed." Permission? Gustavo let out a bitter laugh. "What difference does it make? You've already destroyed our family." Dr. Almeida took out a different sheet of paper. Not typed. Handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I had seen that script on grocery lists, on notes Dr. Eduardo left in the car, on birthday cards he never got around to sending. "To my children, Beatriz and Gustavo." Beatriz sat down again, arms crossed, tears already starting to stream and smudge her expensive makeup. "I leave you the only inheritance that really matters, though I fear you will never accept it. The lesson you refused to learn your whole lives. That unconditional love is worth more than all the money I built. That presence is worth more than presents. That a man who never asked for anything is worth infinitely more than children who never offered anything but bills to pay." Gustavo had his hands covering his face. "You loved me conditionally. As long as I could finance your lifestyles, your debts, your empty ambitions. Marcos loved me. No, love is the wrong word. Marcos respected me, served me, was present in the moments you chose to be absent. At your mother's funeral, when Beatrice was in Paris. The day I found out about the embezzlement, when Gustavo was in Monte Carlo. It was true. Every word. He never asked for a raise, never asked for favors, never asked for anything. And that is exactly why he deserves everything." My vision was blurry. Tears. Hot. Silent. "Marcos, if you are hearing this, I know you are feeling unworthy, guilty, confused. These are the marks of a good man. A man who values the gift more than he feels he deserves it. I spent 20 years watching you. 20 years testing you, without you knowing. And you never failed. Not once." My hand gripped my cap so tight my fingers ached. "That is why I leave you everything I built. Not because you wanted it, but precisely because you never did. The world taught me that the only man who deserves wealth is the one who does not desire it. You proved that every day for 2 decades. I couldn't hold it in anymore." The tears fell freely now, soaking my cap, dripping onto my uniform pants. "Use this money wisely. Do not let yourself be corrupted by it as my children were. Always remember, loyalty is the rarest wealth there is. And you, my dear friend, are the richest man I have ever known." The room was silent again. Even Beatriz had stopped crying, just staring into the void. Gustavo had his hands in his hair, pulling, as if he wanted to rip his own scalp off. And I was frozen, paralyzed, trapped between shock, guilt, disbelief, and something I couldn't name. Something that felt like validation. Like being seen for the first time in 20 years. "Mr. Da Silva?" Dr. Almeida's voice was gentle now. "Do you accept the inheritance?" Accept it? How could I accept it? How could I take a family's money? How could I live in the mansion I had only ever entered through the garage? How could I run companies I didn't even understand? I don't. He can't accept it. Beatrice stood up again. "This is coercion, psychological manipulation. We'll prove in court that—" "You won't prove anything." Dr. Almeida's voice was steel now. "I have 40 pages of documentation, 3 psychiatric evaluations, a 20-minute video where Dr. Eduardo explains every decision in excruciating detail. He predicted every argument you would make. He prepared counter-evidence for each one." "Did he hate us that much?" Gustavo whispered, his voice cracking. "No." Dr. Almeida closed the folder. "He loved you. That's why he left this lesson. He hoped that finally you would learn what truly matters. But I fear he waited in vain." Beatrice grabbed her Hermes bag and walked out of the room, her heels echoing like gunshots on the marble floor. Gustavo followed her, but stopped at the door. He turned to me. And for the first time in his life, He looked at me. Really looked. Not through me. Not past me. Into me. "Did you really never want anything?" he asked, and there was something almost human in that voice. I held his gaze. "I just wanted to be seen," I replied. The first complete truth I had told in 20 years. He shook his head, as if he couldn't understand, and left. The door closed. Dr. Almeida and I were left alone. "Mr. Da Silva," he said again, "I need a formal answer. Do you accept the inheritance left by Eduardo Carvalho Neto?" I looked at the cap in my hands, the worn fabric, the embroidered emblem. 20 years in this uniform, 20 years invisible, and now Dr. Eduardo had seen me, had recognized me, had validated every minute of silent loyalty. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about being seen. "Yes," I whispered. "I accept." Dr. Almeida smiled. A genuine smile. "Eduardo knew you would say that. He also knew you wouldn't immediately understand why. So he asked me to give you this." He took a DVD in a leather case out of his briefcase. It had my name handwritten on the front. "Watch it when you're ready. There's no rush." I took the DVD with trembling hands. What do I do now? Now? Dr. Almeida started packing up the documents. "Now you walk out that door and face the press that is likely already downstairs. Someone always leaks these things. And tomorrow, you come to my office so we can begin the asset transfer." Press. Asset transfer. 870 million raise. My God. What had I just accepted? I stood up, my legs wobbly. I tucked the cap into the inside pocket of my uniform jacket. I don't know why. Maybe because, after 20 years, I couldn't just throw it away. I walked to the elevator in a trance. I pressed the lobby button. The doors opened. And it was like stepping into a storm. Camera flashes. Microphones shoved in my face. Voices shouting questions all at once. "Mr. Da Silva, is it true you inherited almost $1 billion? How did you convince the billionaire? Will the family sue? Did you have a secret relationship with Dr. Eduardo?" Security guards tried to hold back the crowd. Journalists pushed and shoved. TV cameras recorded every second. And I, in the middle of it all, was just trying to breathe. A guard cleared a path to the exit. I pushed through the glass door. Outside, there were even more people. News vans, photographers, onlookers who had stopped on the street to see what was happening. And then I saw it. Parked in front of the building, gleaming under the São Paulo sun, Dr. Eduardo's black Mercedes S-Class. Dr. Almeida appeared at my side. "You have the keys," he said, placing the heavy keychain in my hand. "Eduardo left express instructions. The car is yours. It always was." It always was. I walked to the car like I was in a dream. I unlocked the door. I sat in the driver's seat for the first time in 20 years. The leather still smelled new. The digital dashboard lit up. The steering wheel was exactly as I remembered. But this time, I wasn't driving anyone. This time, I was driving my future. I adjusted the rearview mirror. And for a second, a single impossible second, I swore I saw Dr. Eduardo sitting in the back seat with that look of his. That look I now understood. He had seen me. All this time. He had always seen me. I started the engine. The sound was soft, powerful, familiar. And I drove away from that crowd, from that building, from that old life. I drove towards something I still couldn't comprehend. But for the first time in 47 years, Marcos Henrique da Silva was not invisible. And that, I realized as the tears began to flow again, was the true inheritance Dr. Eduardo had left me. Not the millions, not the mansion, but the certainty that I had mattered, that I had been seen, that 20 years of silent loyalty hadn't been in vain. The São Paulo traffic opened up in front of me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know where I was going. But finally, I was driving my own story. Or at least that's what I tried to convince myself of over the next 3 weeks. Because the truth is, driving your own story is much scarier than following orders from a passenger in the back seat. The newspapers called me the billionaire chauffeur. Magazines plastered my photo with sensationalist headlines, from steering wheel to empire. Brazil's most controversial inheritance. Paparazzi camped outside my small apartment in Capão Redondo, waiting for the moment I would move to the mansion in Jardins. But I didn't move. Beatriz and Gustavo filed 3 different lawsuits. They alleged their father's temporary mental incapacity, manipulation of a vulnerable elderly person, psychological coercion during 20 years of forced proximity. Their lawyers were aggressive, expensive, ruthless. They spoke of me as if I were a predator who had waited 2 decades for the perfect moment to strike. Every accusation felt like a dagger, because a part of me agreed with them. Who was I to receive 870 million reais? A man who barely finished high school. A driver earning 3,500 reais a month. A father ashamed to tell his son where he worked, because private chauffeur sounded like servant in a way that hurt. At night, I'd stare at my bedroom ceiling and see Dr. Eduardo's face. I'd hear his voice saying, "Tell them you were more than a driver." And I'd think, "But I wasn't, sir. I was exactly that. A driver. Nothing more." The lawsuits were all dismissed in the first instance. Dr. Eduardo's lawyer, Dr. Mendes, had prepared a defense that neither Beatriz nor Gustavo could tear down. There was the video recorded 3 months before his death, with Dr. Eduardo in full command of his faculties, stating his reasons. There were psychiatric reports proving mental capacity. There were witnesses attesting he was never under duress. And there was the letter. Dr. Mendes handed me a copy on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. We were in his office, a place of dark wood and solemn silence that made me feel small. "Marcos," he said, sliding the sealed envelope across the desk. "Eduardo asked me to give you this personally, not at the reading of the will. Afterwards, when you were alone with your doubts." My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was his, shaky in those last months, but unmistakably his. "Marcos, if you are reading this, it means you've already tried to give everything back. I know you too well not to know that. You are sitting somewhere, asking God if you deserve what I gave you. Let me answer for him. You don't. No one does. Merit is an invention of people who want to justify their own advantages. You don't deserve this fortune, Marcos. You deserve much more. You deserve 20 years of your life back. 20 years where you heard my secrets and never used them against me. 20 years where you saw me cry and pretended you didn't, to preserve my dignity. 20 years where you could have asked me for anything and never did. My children loved me for what I could give them. You respected me for who I was. That is the difference between merit and value. And if you think I'm crazy, that this money will destroy you, then use it to do what I never had the courage to do. Help people the world has decided are invisible. Be seen, Marcos, and help others be seen too. This isn't my fortune. It never was. It's just money. The true legacy I leave you is this. You matter. You always have. Eduardo. I cried in that office like I hadn't cried since my father died. Dr. Mendes offered me a handkerchief and quietly left the room. When I drove home that night, I stopped at the cemetery. I hadn't visited Dr. Eduardo's grave since the funeral. I was afraid. Afraid of what I would feel. Afraid of the silence he couldn't fill with words of approval. The headstone was simple. He had left clear instructions. No imported marble, no bronze angels. Just his name, the dates, and a phrase. Loyalty is the rarest wealth I have found. I knelt on the wet grass. "Sir," I began, my voice raspy. "I don't know if I deserve this. I don't know if you really thought this through. I'm just a driver." The cold June wind blew through the cypress trees. "I drove you for 20 years. I watched you build empires. I watched you lose Dona Helena. I watched your children tear your heart apart piece by piece, and all I did was drive, stay quiet, ask for nothing. My voice cracked. That isn't worth 870 million reais, sir. That isn't worth anything. But as I spoke, I remembered something. I remembered the day Gustavo was arrested for embezzling company funds. Dr. Eduardo had wept in the back seat, and when we arrived at the mansion, he didn't get out. He sat there, face in his hands, sobbing. I turned off the engine. I waited. After 20 minutes, he said without looking at me, "Do you have a son, Marcos?" "I do, sir. Lucas, 11 years old." "Does he respect you?" I think so, sir." "Then you are richer than I am." At the time, I thought he was just venting. Now I understood. He wasn't leaving me money. He was leaving me validation. Concrete proof, notarized and witnessed by the Brazilian legal system, that I wasn't invisible, that I mattered, that 20 years of silent loyalty held more value than blood, last names, or ambition. And that, I realized kneeling there on the wet grass, wasn't about me. It was about all the people the world decides don't exist. I stood up. I brushed the dirt off my knees. I looked at the headstone. "I'll accept it, sir. But not the way Beatrice and Gustavo think. I'm going to do what you suggested. I'm going to help the invisible." The idea had been born that afternoon with Dr. Mendez, but now it was taking concrete shape. A foundation. Not just any foundation, the kind that exists only on paper to cut taxes. A real foundation. With full scholarships for the children of domestic workers, drivers, doormen, security guards, for the children whose parents the world pretends don't exist. And I knew exactly what to call it. The Eduardo Legacy Foundation. Because his true legacy wasn't the steel mills, the investments, the real estate. It was the lesson he had taken a lifetime to learn, and that he taught me with his final breath. Loyalty is the only currency that never loses value. 3 months after the will was read, the foundation was registered. 5% of the fortune would go to it annually. That amounted to over 40 million reais a year for scholarships, mentorship programs, and vocational training. The newspapers changed their tune. Now they called me the philanthropist chauffeur. Beatriz and Gustavo withdrew the remaining lawsuits, realizing that the legal battle only made them look even greedier in the eyes of public opinion. I hadn't moved into the mansion yet. I didn't know if I ever would. But I had started driving the Mercedes again. Not to work. Just to remember. On a Saturday morning, 3.5 months after Dr. Eduardo's death, I sat in the driver's seat. I adjusted the rearview mirror. I started the engine, the smooth, powerful purr that had been the soundtrack of 20 years of my life. I looked at the back seat, empty, but not completely. Because for an instant, just an instant, I saw Dr. Eduardo reflected in the rearview mirror. Sitting in his usual spot, wearing the gray suit he used for important meetings, hands clasped in his lap. But this time, he was smiling. A small, almost shy smile. And he made a gesture he had never made in 20 years. He nodded, a silent approval. My hands gripped the steering wheel. "Thank you for seeing me, sir," I whispered. When I blinked, the reflection vanished. The back seat was empty again. Just black leather and silence. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew what it meant. I released the handbrake, shifted into gear, started driving. I had no specific destination, no passenger waiting for instructions, no predetermined route, but I had something I never had before. I had a choice. And as the Mercedes glided through the streets of São Paulo, with the morning sun painting the city gold, I realized Dr. Eduardo had given me much more than money. He had given me permission. Permission to exist outside the front seat. Permission to take up space. Permission to believe that my life mattered, not because I served someone important, but because I was important. I drove to marginal Pinheiros. The traffic was light. The city breathed that lazy weekend rhythm, when even São Paulo slows down. I passed the cable-stayed bridge, the avenue where Dr. Eduardo had his offices, the places we had been together hundreds of times, him in the back seat making important calls, me in the front seat being no one. But now I was someone. Not because I had 870 million rees. Money doesn't turn the invisible into the visible. The system just changes the way it ignores you. I was someone because I finally believed it. Because Dr. Eduardo had used his last will, his final statement to the world, to shout a truth I never had the courage to whisper. Marcos Henrique da Silva matters. The driver matters. The man who held the wheel for 20 years matters just as much as the man sitting in the back seat. I stopped the car on the banks of the Pinheiros River, turned off the engine, sat there, listening to the city wake up around me. In the glove compartment was still my chauffeur's cap. The full uniform was hanging in my apartment, washed and pressed, as I always kept it. I wasn't going to get rid of them. They were part of my history. 20 years aren't erased by an inheritance. But they didn't define me anymore either. I grabbed my phone, called Lucas, my son. "Dad?" He answered sleepy. "Good morning, son. Sorry to wake you up early." "It's okay." "What's up?" I took a deep breath. "I wanted to ask you something. Are you ashamed of me?" Silence on the other end. Then, his voice, firm. "What kind of question is that, Dad? Of course not." "Even when I was a driver? Even when your friends asked what I did? Dad." He paused. "You've always been the most honorable person I know. Even when I didn't really understand what you did, I knew that. And now everyone knows it too." My eyes burned. "You taught me that any work done with dignity is noble," Lucas continued. "Remember? You told me that when I was about 8 years old." I didn't remember saying that, but it was exactly the kind of thing I believed. "I love you, son. I love you too, Dad. Now let me sleep." "Come on." He hung up. I laughed, a wet laugh, mixed with tears. I started the engine again, adjusted the rearview mirror one last time. I didn't see Dr. Eduardo this time, but I saw my own reflection. A 47-year-old man. Graying hair, calloused hands, eyes that had seen 2 decades of someone else's life and that now, finally, were looking at their own. I put the car in motion. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe back to the apartment. Maybe to the mansion in Jardins that now belonged to me. Maybe nowhere, just driving, feeling the wheel under my hands and the freedom of having no set route. But I knew one thing. For the first time in 47 years, I wasn't driving someone else's life. I was driving my own. And Dr. Eduardo Carvalho Neto, wherever he was smiling. Because loyalty isn't about blind devotion. It's about mutual respect between 2 human beings who decided to see each other, even when the whole world insists on keeping one of them invisible. He saw me. And now, finally, I saw myself too. The Mercedes accelerated smoothly along the expressway. The sun rose over São Paulo. And Marcos Henrique da Silva, the driver who became an heir, the invisible man who became undeniable, was driving toward a future he would choose for himself. No passengers, no orders, just a man and the road. And for the first time in his life, that was more than enough. It was everything.